Chapter 91. Torment. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 91. Torment. Qi Shuyan didn't feel the slightest bit flustered under the questioning gazes of Yang Wenbin and his wife. She looked at Yang Hongsheng without any change in her expression and said, "Young Master Yang, I came on your account. I didn't intend to take on any business during the college entrance exam, but since these two don't trust me, there's no need for me to be here any longer." Master Qi. Yang Hongsheng was apologetic and was about to urge her to stay, but Qi Shuyan stopped him with a glance. After Qi Shuyan finished speaking, Qian Hongxin quietly let out a breath and his clenched fists in his sleeves relaxed as he thought that it was over. Who would have thought that Qi Shuyan would suddenly change the topic? She stared sharply at Qian Hongxin with her tourmaline-like eyes and said, "It's fine not to go ahead with the business, but this gentleman has slandered me and said that I started rumors. I have no choice but to take issue with you. Before I leave, there are some things I have to make clear first. Didn't you curse Feiyu to turn into an idiot or a vegetable sooner or later?" "I clearly heard it," Qian Hongxin quickly interrupted, wanting to have the final say. "Hasn't it already come true?" Qi Shuyan sneered at Yang Wenbin and his wife. "That day, I already saw that your son's soul and body were in disharmony, and it appeared that his soul had left his body before. In this state, it's very easy to see dirty things which usually can't be seen. Once you're given a scare, what happens when the soul and body are in disharmony?" Su Yunxin was stunned at first. Her son had indeed narrowly escaped death once before, and had even stopped breathing. What Master Qi said seemed to make sense, and she couldn't help but ask the question anxiously. Qi Shuyan paused for a moment before she continued, "Once you suffer a fright, you either become a vegetable or an idiot for the time being, another scare and you'll lose your life and become a wandering ghost. I was going to give a warning out of the goodness of my heart, but unfortunately, before I could finish, this guy rushed out and indiscriminately yelled at me for being a liar. I did that because..." Qian Hongxin noticed Yang Wenbin and his wife's scrutiny and was about to snap back in reply. "Was it because you were worried? But what this madam is demonstrating here is the normal worried reaction. You didn't even look for confirmation. You just barked like a mad dog and scared my 5-year-old brother. I thought it was because you were afraid I was going to tell the truth." Qi Shuyan immediately cut him off. Su Yunxin frowned and looked at Qian Hongxin, lost in thought. Only after listening to the young lady in front of her did she realize that there was something wrong with Qian Hongxin today. The formerly gentle and calm boy was acting the complete opposite today, and seemed especially against using this method. He didn't even want to give it a try out of the slightest bit of hope, and was too agitated. "Don't talk nonsense. I was just worried that Feiyu would fall for your glib tongue," Qian Hongxin said angrily. Qi Shuyan didn't answer, but shifted her gaze to the woman beside Su Yunxin, who was supporting a big belly. She pondered before she turned to Qian Hongxin. "This gentleman, your relationship with the Yang family is really good. You even brought your pregnant wife here with you." "Teacher, ma'am, look, I told you this person is only here to talk nonsense. She doesn't even have the ability to discern something like this. What fate, don't lead people astray." Qian Hongxin said triumphantly. "Young lady, that's my son's girlfriend next to him." Su Yunxin immediately felt a little embarrassed. "Is that so?" Qi Shuyan's eyes were filled with doubt. But the slight redness of both their bottom eyelids clearly indicate they conceived recently. What a coincidence. At her words, the living room fell dead silent for one moment. "What do you mean?" "Xinfang and I are innocent, so you better keep your mouth shut." Qian Hongxin glared at Qi Shuyan furiously. "Why are you so worked up? I didn't say you weren't innocent, I just wanted to congratulate the two of you on your upcoming happy occasion." Qi Shuyan feigned innocence and shrugged. Qian Hongxin's face stiffened and he was immediately rendered speechless by Qi Shuyan's words. Was she saying that he was admitting to it? Noticing the scrutiny and suspicion of the people present, Qian Hongxin realized that he had been provoked once more. His eyes flashed and he did his best to calm his agitation so as not to expose himself. He sneered. I don't even have a girlfriend, so how can I have a child? That's not necessarily true. Nowadays, there are plenty of men who don't have girlfriends but cuckold other people and have children, Qi Shuyan replied with innocent eyes. Qian Hongxin's face immediately turned unsightly, especially when Lu Xinfang gave him a panicked look at that moment. Qian Hongxin instantly wanted to curse. Was this stupid woman trying to get him killed? He forced himself to calm down, but his hands in his sleeves were clenched white. He deliberately sneered and said, then your physiognomy skills aren't up to scratch. I'm focusing on my studies now and have no interest in other things. He looked at Yang Wenbin. Teacher, I spend all day in the lab with you. Where would I have the time for anything else? Yang Wenbin was still very fond of this favorite student of his, who was diligent and smart. Qian Hongxin was also as close as brothers with his own son. He didn't believe that Qian Hongxin would do such a thing, so he said vaguely, Hongxin indeed works hard. Seeing that Yang Wenbin trusted him, Qian Hongxin was about to breathe a sigh of relief, but suddenly became vigilant. Afraid that Qi Shuyan would spout nonsense, he stared intently at her until he saw that she had no intention of retorting. He heaved a sigh of relief and glared at Qi Shuyan somewhat aggrievedly at the same time. Su Yunxin, on the other hand, lowered her eyes. She had noticed Lu Xinfang's movements, and couldn't help thinking about this young lady's words. After all, when her son went to college, it was Qian Hongxin who hooked him up with Lu Xinfang. Moreover, this had happened to her son because Lu Xinfang had suggested going to a haunted house to play. Once something happened to her son, Lu Xinfang then confessed to them that she was pregnant. It was too much of a coincidence. Su Yunxin had to admit that she had prepared for the worst. She had brought Lu Xinfang to the Yang family because she thought that if they couldn't reverse the situation and her son really became a vegetable, it would be good to have someone carry on the family line for her son. But now that she thought about it, everything seemed to have fallen into place step by step. She clenched her fists. Why did everything turn out just right? Okay, that's all I have to say. I have an exam in the afternoon, so I'll leave first. Satisfied, Qi Shuyan looked at Qian Hongxin, who was choking on his own spit, and turned around to leave. Hey, young lady, since you're here, you may as well give it a try. After what Qi Shuyan said, Su Yunxin still felt that it made sense, and the target of her suspicion had clearly changed. Ma'am. Qian Hongxin didn't think that ma'am wouldn't have given up on the idea, and was about to say something, but Su Yunxin glared at him. Stunned, Qian Hongxin shut his mouth. He also knew that ma'am had to be suspicious of him now, and was flustered. Madam, I'm very expensive to hire. Qi Shuyan smiled faintly, and it was bottomless and cold as she warned, if it isn't a base price of 2 million, then I'm sorry, I can't help you with this matter. With that, she turned around to leave. The crowd was struck dumb and immediately reacted. They knew that Qi Shuyan was holding a grudge. They didn't expect this young lady, who didn't look that capable, to have such a temper. Su Yunxin watched as Qi Shuyan walked to the door, and she swiftly went over and shouted, Hey, young lady, hold on. If you can cure my son, 2 million is nothing. Chapter 92. Cornered and Desperate Qian Hongxin. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 92. Cornered and desperate Qian Hongxin. Qi Shuyan followed Su Yunxin up to the second floor and bent down to carefully study Yang Feiyu, who was lying unconscious and pale in bed. Everyone held their breaths and stared curiously at Qi Shuyan. Seeing that she didn't make a move for a long while and instead seemed to be thinking about something, they were puzzled. What's wrong? Su Yunxin asked. Your son is under the soul separation curse. This kind of curse requires his birth characters and the hair from his body for it to be implemented. It won't be obvious in the short term, and he might even look well. Qi Shuyan's face turned slightly cold, and she narrowed her star-dot-like eyes. But if a person is under this curse for a long time and can't take being frightened to begin with, it's easy for them to see dirty things. Going to a haunted house, bungee-jumping, and other thrill-seeking activities is just courting death. When Su Yunxin heard Qi Shuyan's words, she was horrified. If what this young lady said was true, then birth characters and personal effects could only be obtained by those who were extremely close to the person in question, which would give anyone a hold over them. Moreover, this soul separation curse had been set up who knew when, and even the cause couldn't be found. How absurd! A load of nonsense and alarmist talk. What curse, what lost soul? Do you think this is still the feudalistic era? Are you going to play at being a god now? Qian Hongxin's eyes were filled with contempt and dissatisfaction, and he advised Professor Yang Wenbin on the side earnestly, "Teacher, if you really let her mess around and word of this spreads, what will the students of our university think of you? Besides, the university extols science and casts off feudalistic rubbish, what will the university think of you? Qian Hongxin, is reputation or my son more important?" Su Yunxin had sunk into thought for a moment, and was extremely unhappy when she heard Qian Hongxin's words. In the face of Qian Hongxin's repeated obstructions, she instead became more and more convinced that there was no harm in giving it a try. Even if she was uncertain in her heart, she was unwilling to let go of a glimmer of hope. Thus, she stared at him unkindly and said coldly, "No one is forcing you to believe. If you're really uncomfortable being here, then please leave first." Qian Hongxin was slightly stunned and his face quickly flushed red with extreme embarrassment. He really didn't expect Su Yunxin to be so blunt in front of everyone and not leave him any face at all. He was somewhat unresigned. "Ma'am, this method isn't reliable at all, shut up." Su Yunxin glared at Qian Hongxin. She knew that Yang Wenbin was a man of face and reputation. He was already feeling reluctant over this matter. If Qian Hongxin said any more, Yang Wenbin might not agree to try this method. Su Yunxin already had some thoughts in her heart. She had already begun to suspect that Qian Hongxin and Lu Xinfang were working together to play them for fools. Now that Qian Hongxin repeatedly blocked her, even if the outcome wasn't the conspiracy theory she was thinking of, her impression of Qian Hongxin had completely plummeted. Qi Shuyan glanced at Su Yunxin, whose complexion didn't look too good, and said, "Madam, I have two solutions for you to choose from now. The first is to summon the soul, then lift the curse. The second is to summon the soul first, then use magic to make the curse on your son rebound on the culprit. Of course, the second method is a bit more expensive than the first. Of course I choose the second option." Su Yunxin also wanted to know who was the heartless person who harmed her son. Qi Shuyan curled her lip. She obviously had no doubt which option Su Yunxin would choose. Qi Shuyan stretched out a hand and the Yin Ghost Gonfalon appeared. It started to suck up all the excess Yin energy that had gathered on Yang Feiyu. Who knew how she did it, but she took a thin red strip of backflow incense out of nowhere and rubbed it lightly between her index and middle fingers. The red strip of backflow incense was suddenly set alight without the use of fire. Qi Shuyan blew on the flames, and the backflow incense immediately let out white smoke. Exerting strength in her fingertips, she threw out the burning backflow incense and it firmly pierced Yang Feiyu's headboard. This scene amazed everyone. Su Jiqing stared every now and then at the Yin Ghost Gonfalon which had appeared out of nowhere and flown up into the air, then rubbed her eyes every now and then as she looked at the backflow incense in the headboard that was burning without fire. Her worldview was refreshed again and again. "Son, I'm not seeing things, right?" Su Jiqing almost wondered if she was at an international large-scale magic show. Furthermore, it was broad daylight. There wasn't even a stage to conceal the effects, let alone any props. Su Jiqing was amazed and nudged the calm Yang Hongxing with her elbow. "Mom, you're not seeing things. Yang Hongsheng was a bit better off than the others, who were all astonished. After all, he had seen Qi Shuyan catch ghosts last time. She was just summoning a soul this time, but it was just as impressive. He stared unblinkingly throughout the whole process, and admired Qi Shuyan more and more in his heart. This was a true master, one could tell as soon as she made a move. Su Yunxin and Yang Wenbin were stunned and they saw the unscientific scene in front of them. Qian Hongxin and Lu Xinfang also stared with wide eyes, but compared with Yang Wenbin and his wife's anticipation and delight, the two of them were filled with panic. Lu Xinfang's psychological state was poor, and she kept looking at Qian Hongxin. Fed up with Lu Xinfang's gaze, Qian Hongxin's fingers in his sleeves had turned white and his legs trembled slightly. His back was covered in cold sweat from fear, and only by gritting his teeth could he remain standing. He felt torment and regret in his heart, and could only hope that this person had half-baked skills. He was filled with regret. From the moment he accidentally overheard Qi Shuyan's words at the restaurant to meeting her today, he should have been on full alert and stopped her at all costs. Staring intently at the inverted incense and seeing that Yang Feiyu still didn't move on the bed after a long while, Su Yunxin and her husband were somewhat disappointed. But on the next exhale, Yang Feiyu's fingers suddenly moved, when he had been lying silent and motionless. His body seized up and he even let out a blood-curdling scream. Su Yunxin and the others were given a fright when they saw Yang Feiyu like this, but they didn't dare go forward for fear of messing things up, and could only look pleadingly at Qi Shuyan. Ah! Yang Feiyu screamed louder and louder, and his body turned this way and that like he was being tortured in a fire. The Su couple had to look away. What are you doing to Feiyu? Stop it, he's in pain. Just when everyone couldn't help looking away, Qian Hongxin seized the opportunity to lunge forward like a cornered dog to knock Qi Shuyan aside. Chapter 93. Master Qi, you don't have to save me money. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 93. Master Qi, you don't have to save me money. When everyone saw Qian Hongxin's action, they all gasped. What if there was an accident and everything was ruined at the last step? In particular, Su Yunxin's eyes widened and her heart was suddenly in her throat when Qian Hongxin lunged forward to stop Qi Shuyan. She stared intently, afraid of the slightest mistake. But Qi Shuyan didn't even turn around. With a wave of one hand, she directly sent Qian Hongxin, a big man who weighed over 100 pounds, flying. Everyone breathed out, and Yang Hongsheng was the first to react, anger welling up in his heart. He was chagrined that he had given this bastard an opportunity because he had been watching the scene too intently. He stepped forward right away and rudely gave Qian Hongxin, who was sprawled on the ground, a few kicks, sending him sprawling. Qian Hongxin was afraid of the backlash from the curse and kept trying to get up, but was kicked to the floor by the furious Yang Hongxing again and again. Master Qi, Su Yunxin couldn't read anything from Qi Shuyan's exceptionally cold and calm face, and she couldn't help but call out softly in worry. On the bed, Yang Feiyu struggled in pain. It was even a little grotesque to look at. He writhed on the bed like an evil spirit and let out a string of sharp screams. Qi Shuyan glanced at the small section of the backflow incense that was left, then turned to the side and explained, "The soul has been summoned back, but your son has been under the soul separation curse for too long, so his soul and body are somewhat incompatible. It would be worrying if it didn't hurt." Su Yunxin understood what Qi Shuyan was saying, but her heart still couldn't help but clench in pain when she saw her son hurting. Yang Wenbin also felt terrible, not only for his son, but also for the loss of his favorite student. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Qian Hongxin keep trying to get to his feet to stop them. How could Yang Wenbin not understand? The moment the backflow incense in the headboard burned to ash, Yang Feiyu also abruptly stopped struggling. Qi Shuyan saw that it was time, and directly put away the Yin ghost Gonfalon which had absorbed all the Yin energy. She took out a peace talisman from her bag and handed it to Su Yunxin. It will take a while for your son's soul and body to adapt to fusing together. Put this peace talisman on him and don't take it off for at least half a month. It can be used to lock the soul in place. After saying that, she retreated to the side. Holding the peace talisman, Su Yunshin walked over with an excited and nervous face, and said softly, "Feiyu." Yang Feiyu's chest rose and fell, exhaustion and sweat all over his face. He opened his eyes and called out, "Mom." When Su Yunshin saw that her son no longer looked half dead and had opened his eyes as he really woke up, she was thrilled and looked at her husband and her second sister. "Second sister, Wenbin, Feiyu really is awake." She couldn't help but cry tears of joy as she spoke. Master Qi, thank you so much. If it wasn't for you, we really wouldn't know what to do." Su Yunshin looked at Qi Shuyan. Qi Shuyan's petite figure suddenly became incomparably lofty and awe-inspiring in her eyes. Recalling how they had suspected this master of being a charlatan earlier, Su Yunshin felt a little embarrassed. In fact, she had been resolute in letting this girl try and save Feiyu despite her own uncertainty. She had only thought of giving it a shot, but hadn't expected for what looked like the most unreliable method on the surface to save her son's life. Su Yunshin was secretly glad that she wasn't as pedantic as her husband. If she had waited for those experts, her son would have long become a lonely ghost and she wouldn't even be able to cry then. It was a good thing she hadn't listened to the words of Qian Hongxin, this vile man. Thinking of Qian Hongxin, she turned her head and glared fiercely at the man on the floor, and also took out some of her anger on Yang Wenbin next to her. Yang Wenbin had been extremely biased toward this favorite student of his in the past, and wasn't even that interested in his own son. He even praised Qian Hongxin's good behavior. Su Yunshin sneered. What good behavior? He was two different people in front of others and behind their backs. He was human on the surface, but a devil on the inside. Su Yunshin glanced at Lu Xinfang, who was trembling on the side with a panicked look on her face and who couldn't even stand steady on her feet. She had initially wanted Qi Shuyan to help her divine whether she had a child or not, but now it seemed that there was no need. Lu Xinfang was obviously in cahoots with Qian Hongxin. When Qi Shu came, she came alone with Yang Hongsheng and her skills were called into question. When she left the Yang family, she was surrounded by grateful people as she got into Yang Hongsheng's car. Qi Shuyan had goosebumps all over her body from the way everyone looked at her like she was a living treasure. This big family was really similar to Yang Hongsheng when he acted shamelessly. Yang Hongsheng sneered inwardly at his mother and third aunt, who had told him to treat Master Qi well. He has always been a visionary person. Of course he would hug a golden thigh like Master Qi, and never let go. Master Qi, there's still some time now. Let me take you to eat first, or it'll be unbearable to do the exam on an empty stomach, Yang Hongsheng said in concern. Qi Shuyan saw that there was still plenty of time, so she nodded in agreement. Hey, just stop there. Qi Shuyan suddenly pointed at a place. Master Qi, what's wrong? Yang Hongsheng, who had thought of everything, was about to go to a high-class restaurant. Looking at the noisy environment around him, he was dazed for a moment, but as Qi Shuyan wished, he parked the car. That one looks good. Qi Shuyan pointed at a stand for hot and sour noodles. Yang Hongsheng. Master Qi, you don't have to save me money. How will I ask for talismans if you don't empty my pockets? Yang Hongsheng's heart rattled as he did some calculations. It obviously wasn't as easy to buy talismans from Master Qi's Taobao shop as it had been at the beginning. His own talismans had all been cleanly wrecked by his father, and the last two were even given to his cousin for use. Ever since the last time he was possessed by a starving ghost, he felt unsafe going out without talismans, and Master Qi was even with him. If they really encountered any trouble, he was a long way from being able to protect himself. Yang Hongsheng was thinking about how to thicken his skin and order more talismans, but as he pondered, Qi Shuyan got out of the car before he could come back to his senses. Qi Shuyan stood outside and waved to the dazed Yang Hongsheng. Forget it, you don't look used to eating here. I have heavier tastes. You should go back first. This area is close to the school, and I'll get there in 3 bus stops. Yang Hongsheng watched helplessly as his opportunity to wine and dine Master Qi was about to slip away. He instantly turned off the engine, unbuckled his seatbelt and got out all in one breath. He hurriedly wailed, Master Qi, don't be so heartless. Looking at Yang Hongsheng's exaggerated performance, the corner of Qi Shuyan's mouth twitched. She suddenly remembered the almost tangible hatred and jealousy in Feng Yanli's gaze, and she said, if you act like this in front of Feng Yanli, she'll definitely be disillusioned. Chapter 94. Gao Lingxue complains you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 94. Gao Lingxue complains o.org. When Yang Hongsheng heard that, he couldn't help but smile bitterly. If only it were really that easy. It's a pity she's like a sticky candy that can't be torn off. Yang Hongsheng shuddered at the thought of the headless dolls and threatening letters that Feng Yanli sent to the girls he dated 2 years ago, and the late-night calls she gave him which were just as murderous. She even sent him bloody letters, which were very chilling. Fortunately, his father had given the Feng family a warning, so Feng Yanli restrained herself a bit. However, that shadowy, dark insect-like gaze still inexplicably chilled him. Qi Shuyan was a bit surprised when she saw Yang Hongsheng's disgusted expression that couldn't even be described as dislike. She thought Feng Yanli would be a little friendlier toward the man she liked. Besides, although Yang Hongsheng was profligate and changed girlfriends all the time, he was forthright and easy to get along with. Qi Shuyan sighed with emotion and didn't think too much about it. She turned her head and walked toward the stand for hot and sour noodles. In the end, just as she was about to enter the store, she felt a refreshing fluctuation of spiritual energy. She turned and walked into the neighboring orchid shop. Chen, we're all taking the college entrance exam now, shouldn't we go back and study? Gao Lingxue said as she carefully looked at Yang Qinchen's face. Okay, go study. I'm going to go walk around. Yang Qinchen acted as if she didn't care and said, but you broke my jade bracelet, and need to compensate me 1,000,000 yuan at least. Gao Lingxue turned white. She should have known that Yang Qinchen would say that. She thought of how she had secretly worn Yang Qinchen's jade bracelet and ended up being caught red-handed by Yang Qinchen. She regretted it immediately, and when she thought about it later, it had been a trap set by Yang Qinchen. If that jade bracelet really cost 1,000,000, Yang Qinchen wouldn't have left it out so easily. It was at most tens of thousands, but tens of thousands was still very expensive for Gao Lingxue. Gao Lingxue was filled with grievances. Recalling how she had been tormented by this heiress in the last few days, she cursed this *tch inwardly. Why did she still care about tens of thousands when she was so rich? The richer someone was, the stingier they were. Gao Lingxue couldn't help but think of her generous fourth uncle. How rich was he? Whenever the beginning of the month came around, he would send practically all his wage back. She could buy whatever she wanted and didn't have to worry about money at all. This mere tens of thousands was nothing. But now, her family could barely make ends meet. Her parents didn't go to work, but stayed home and ate into their nest egg. Her living standards had plummeted drastically. If her mother knew that she had to shell out tens of thousands in compensation, she'd skin her alive. Gao Lingxue shuddered in fear and suddenly remembered that Qi Shuyan had gone on a trip to the capital, and might have had to spend tens of thousands for it. The bit of money Gao Lingxue owed in comparison was nothing. Gao Lingxue suddenly felt less guilty at this thought and a bit of obstinacy welled up. Why could Qi Shuyan spend so much money, but she couldn't? Moreover, it was Qi Shuyan who owed her. If it wasn't for her, would fourth uncle have broken off relations with her family? Her family was now at the end of their rope. Thinking of the culprit behind her downfall, Qi Shuyan, she gnashed her teeth in hatred and spat venomously. Moreover, she had repeatedly bowed and lowered her dignity to show weakness to Qi Shuyan. She didn't expect that this little B*TCH would be so shameless as to not give her face and didn't treat her as an older sister at all. Why is my cousin's car parked here? Yang Chenchen had long known that her grades weren't good. She could just spend some money on whatever university she wanted to enter. If she really couldn't, she could also study abroad, so she didn't take the college entrance exam seriously at all. Looking around casually, she saw a car that looked a lot like her cousin's, Yang Hongcheng's. Is this a Maserati worth $1 million? Chen, your cousin's family is really rich, but your brother may not be the only person to have one. Maybe, Gao Lingxue flattered Yang Chen wantonly, but felt that she was thinking too much. Idiot, my brother's car is a limited edition. It costs more than a few million, how can I not recognize it? Yang Chen sneered and ignored Gao Lingxue as she walked ahead. Gao Lingxue was stunned and swallowed her saliva. Millions for a car. How rich was she? Recalling Yang Chen's arrogant tilt of her chin, Gao Lingxue gritted her teeth hatefully. The more she thought about Yang Chen, the more pus practically oozed out of her heart. Why was it that every single one of them was better off than her? It was just that they had reincarnated better. Country bumpkin, what are you staring at? Come and help me find him. Yang Chen glared at Gao Lingxue. She really was a complete fool. If she wasn't bored, such a person wasn't even worthy to carry her shoes. Oh. Gao Lingxue didn't dare make Yang Chen angry either, so she immediately acted as if she was helping her look for someone, and pointed at a place. Chen, I'll go over there and look. She quickened her pace as she spoke, intending to just relax right under Yang Chen's nose. Who the hell would help her find someone? Leaning against the wall of a snack stand, Gao Lingxue planned to slack off as she fanned herself with her palm. Gao Lingxue sniffed and smelled a faint fragrance. She turned her head toward a shop and poked her head inside. She was stupefied when she saw the orchids. They were so beautiful and fragrant. But looking at this gorgeous and elegant shop, she didn't even have the courage to walk in. Noticing a bright and glistening flower on display outside, Gao Lingxue glanced left and right, but no one was looking at her. She snuck over to the flower pot. Covering it with her back, she raised her head and looked around again, and was just about to pinch it. 500,000, that's the highest I'll go. A familiar voice rang out and Gao Lingxue was stunned. Even if she died, she would never mistake that voice for anyone else's. It obviously belonged to her cousin, Qi Shuyan. But she said 500,000 yuan. What did she mean? Gao Lingxue immediately twisted around to look inside, and with her sharp eyes, she immediately noticed two familiar backs. One was indeed her cousin, and the other was Yang Chen's cousin, Yang Hongsheng. 00000 for a flower. Gao Lingxue stared incredulously as pain and resentment surged up in her heart. Her face flushed red and she almost jumped out and cursed furiously. How could she waste her family's money like that? 500,000, it wasn't just tens of thousands. If mom and grandma knew, they would beat this little B*TCH half to death. It wasn't like Gao Lingxue was wasting her family's money, so why was fourth uncle letting Qi Shuyan mess around like this? Even if Gao Lingxue paid Yang Chen back, there would still be a lot of money left. The most infuriating was that Qi Shuyan didn't think of her cousin at all and would rather buy a flower. Didn't she know that her family was living in misery? Right, beat her half to death. A thought suddenly flashed through Gao Lingxue's mind. She rolled her eyes and immediately took out her phone to record a video. She snorted softly. She would see how fourth uncle would cover for this little B*TCH this time. Chapter 95. Do you have to be so ruthless? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 95. Do you have to be so ruthless? As soon as Qi Shuyan walked into the orchid shop, that refreshing and lush spiritual energy grew denser. When the florist heard footsteps, he turned his head and saw that it was a young and extremely beautiful girl. He perfunctorily said, "Welcome, please have a look." After that, he lowered his head and continued to broken-heartedly hug the rotten roots of his family's lone orchid. The experts had earlier appraised this type of orchid at a sky-high price. He had initially planned to take advantage of this popularity and show his face at the exchange fair and sell the orchid for a good price at the same time. Who would have thought that the lone orchid which he had meticulously cared for would suddenly rot at the roots? In the past few days, the roots had rotted even more. Forget selling it at a good price, he was even going to make a loss. He was so anxious that he was like an ant on a hot pan. "Boss, what's the price of that orchid in your hand?" Qi Shuyan looked around, and after a while, she found the source of the spiritual energy. It was the orchid that the boss was holding, in a pot that looked like a fairy basket. The boss's eyes lit up when he heard that someone was going to buy it, but when he looked up and saw that it was the girl just now, his eyes filled with doubt. "Young lady, it's not that I don't want to sell it, but this flower pot is worth $1 million at least. Can you afford it?" "How can I not afford it? Shuyan, I'll pay." Yang Hongsheng saw this scene as soon as he entered the door. How could he miss out on such a moment to curry favor? The florist didn't take Qi Shuyan seriously at first and didn't think she had the money to buy the orchid. When he saw the handsome boy dressed in branded clothes who followed her in, however, his face instantly lit up. "I don't want much either, I'll give it to you at half price. 1.5 million. The florist opened his mouth. Seeing that Yang Hongsheng was about to pay, Qi Shuyan hurriedly stopped him and smiled faintly at the florist. "Boss, you're too insincere in your business. The roots of the orchid are rotting, and it won't live for much longer. If even an expert like you can't do anything about it, how can we novices keep it alive?" Qi Shuyan had just discovered that while the orchid had abundant spiritual energy, it was a bit strange that the spiritual energy bubbled out uncontrollably in bursts. On a closer look, she found that the roots underneath were slightly rotten. The florist was shocked. This girl looked gullible, but he didn't expect her eyes to be so sharp. He was immediately embarrassed. When Yang Hongsheng heard Qi Shuyan, he hurriedly looked at the roots of the orchid and found that they really had started to rot. He was immediately furious and flew into a rage. He originally wanted Master Qi to owe him a favor so that if he managed to somehow provoke her later, she couldn't get mad at him. Yang Hongsheng wasn't someone to be trifled with. He also had the temper of a young master, so he immediately cursed the florist to death. "Shuyan, let's go. Do you like orchids a lot? I'll find you something else." Yang Hongsheng pondered whether he should steal his grandfather's pot of great Tang phoenix feathers that was worth millions and give those to Master Qi. Qi Shuyan looked at the orchid hesitantly. Thin white mist swirled among the glittering flowers. If the blood-drinking wood was steeped in this orchid, it should be enough to replenish the spiritual energy. 1.5 million wasn't too expensive for this lone, spiritual orchid, but she was afraid she wouldn't be able to keep it alive. Seeing that the two were about to turn around and leave, the florist panicked. "Hey, young lady, how about $1 million? "Whatever," Yang Hongsheng replied. Seeing that the two really were going to leave, the florist was really anxious. Hey, don't go. The price is negotiable, let's discuss it calmly." "Is the price negotiable?" Qi Shuyan paused, turned to the florist and said bluntly, 500,000, that's the highest I'll go. What she was interested in was the orchid's spiritual energy. It was about to rot and she didn't know if it could be saved. What if the money was wasted? The florist gritted his teeth and looked at Qi Shuyan's face. He could only nod painfully. "Fine, 500,000 it is." If he waited any longer, the orchid's value would fall sooner or later in his hands, so it was better to hurry up and get rid of it. "Please pack it up for me. I transfer the money to this account, is that right?" Qi Shuyan pulled out her phone to transfer the money. The florist froze for a moment, surprised by his poor judgment. He thought at first that the two were a couple, or that the boy was a rich second-generation heir spending money extravagantly as he tried to woo a girl. But it now seemed that this wasn't the case at all. Maybe it was this girl who was Miss Perfect. He never thought that young people nowadays could already be so rich. As Qi Shuyan and Yang Hongsheng carried the orchid out the door, they were caught off guard when someone suddenly popped out from the corner. "Okay, Qi Shuyan, did you steal the money from home?" Gao Lingxue had watched helplessly and in pain as Qi Shuyan paid the money, only then did she save the full recording and send it to her mother as evidence. She jumped out in dissatisfaction and lashed out. "Do you think I'm you? Specializing in fixating on other people's pockets?" Qi Shuyan sneered. "Steal money? What a joke. The money she was spending was what she had earned herself. What are you talking about? I'm your sister, and everything I've done is for your own good." Gao Lingxue looked like she expected better from Qi Shuyan. "You're so ignorant and secretly took 500,000 yuan to buy a flower. You're obviously trying to puff yourself up in front of young Master Yang and still stubbornly refuse to admit it. Otherwise, where did you get the 500,000 from?" "I'm sorry, my parents gave birth to just me. I don't have an older sister like you. At most, we're just distant relatives with not much of a connection." Qi Shuyan looked indifferent and sneered, "Even if my own sister isn't qualified to lecture me, who do you think you are? Even if I throw money into the sewers, please remember that it's my money. It has nothing to do with you. Qi Shuyan, you have no conscience. How ungrateful. My family raised you for so many years. How much painstaking effort did my mother put in to raise an ingrate like you? What distant relatives with no connection? Say it in front of fourth uncle if you dare. Let's see if he doesn't beat you up." Gao Lingxue was incredulous. Qi Shuyan had just committed such treason and dared to say such a thing. She was simply too cold-blooded. Envy. Qi Shuyan looked at Gao Lingxue's condemning expression which said, "I clearly showed you favor, but you're ungrateful." She was so angry that she laughed. Gao Lingxue's double standards were too refreshing and refined. Who the hell raised who? It was Gao Lingxue's entire family who clearly lived off her father's money. What did Gao Lingxue's mother spend her blood, sweat, and tears on? Doing whatever she could to rake in money. Scheme against her. Raise me. How shameless are you? Do your parents have a job? All these years, the money your family spent was clearly my father's. Qi Shuyan was cold as she hit the nail on the head. Gao Lingxue's face stiffened. Noticing Yang Hongsheng's measuring gaze, she thought she had lost face in front of young Master Yang. Her face flushed red and she glared at Qi Shuyan. How can you be so unscrupulous? We're all family, and my mother is your father's third sister. We're siblings, yet you keep talking about money. Is money that important to you? The more Gao Lingxue spoke, the more she felt that Qi Shuyan had forgotten her roots, and she began to scold her. Do you have to calculate it so clearly? Besides, think of how my mother cooks and does housework for us all day long. When you hired a housekeeper, did my mother say anything about that money? We all have our burdens. Is there a need to be so ruthless? Chapter 96. Fight, I'm not afraid. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 96. Fight, I'm not afraid. Qi Shuyan facepalmed. She really couldn't understand Gao Lingxue's logic. They were talking about who coughed up the money to support the family. Gao Lingxue nonsensically twisted it into a discussion on family ties. Besides, when did they ever have that kind of thing? Qi Shuyan hired a housekeeper, who did her job conscientiously and respectfully, unlike Gao Lingxue's mother, who nagged and scolded all day long. She had never helped wash her clothes or clean the house. She had never King borne any sort of burden. Qi Shuyan rolled her eyes and was genuinely disinclined to talk to her. It didn't make sense to reason with her. In any case, in Gao Lingshue's eyes, Qi Shuyan would always be the one who took advantage of her family, and it was Gao Lingxue who suffered. Gao Lingxue saw that Qi Shuyan was silent and disinclined to bother with her, unrepentant and unmoved by anything Gao Lingxue said. It felt like everything she said went in one ear and out the other. As her cousin, Gao Lingxue felt that she was responsible for teaching Qi Shuyan a lesson since she was going down the wrong path. She turned to Yang Hongsheng, who was holding the orchid on the side, and apologized. "Young Master Yang, my sister isn't sensible and has given you a lot of trouble. I also don't have it easy as her sister." She suddenly felt extremely embarrassed and said, "Young Master Yang, I hope you can do me a favor. This flower is too expensive for us. Can you help us return it?" "Sorry, I don't think it's expensive and I won't return it." Qi Shuyan smiled insincerely and enunciated each word coldly. Gao Lingxue was about to vomit blood at Qi Shuyan's attitude and words. What a spendthrift. If they could get this money back, she had to help her cousin safeguard it, she thought to herself. Yang Hongsheng also looked a bit impatient. It wasn't like it was her money. She was troublesome, but in the end, she was Master Qi's cousin. There was no point in saying anything more. He said directly, "I'll pay this sum on Shuyan's behalf." That should be enough, right? Gao Lingxue was stunned. She didn't expect Yang Hongsheng to be so generous. For a rich man like Yang Hongsheng, however, hundreds of thousands was probably nothing. His car cost millions, after all. Looking at his handsome face, she was stupefied. She bit her lip and said, then, young Master Yang, remember to put it on my tab. I don't have anything I can give you, but I can still do housework. When the time comes, I can wash your clothes and cook for you every day." Yang Hongsheng was dumbstruck at Gao Lingxue's train of thought. He had never seen such a moron. Wash his clothes and cook for him. His family didn't lack housekeepers, did he look so desperate? Yang Hongsheng pursed his lips in disgust. Qi Shuyan almost burst out laughing when she heard Gao Lingshue's last line. Gao Lingxue was really talented. Had she watched too many idol dramas? We'll see. We still have things to do, so we'll take our leave first. Yang Hongsheng showed a polite smile and signaled to Qi Shuyan with his eyes to leave quickly. Gao Lingxue stared blankly at Yang Hongsheng's smile. Was he interested in her, then? She watched as the two got into the car, and was about to chase after him and ask if he could give her a ride, when the car fumes swept over her. Gao Lingxue patted her clothes and looked resentfully at the luxury car that left. Young Master Yang was obviously interested in her just now, so why didn't he give her a ride? It had to be because of her cousin's nonsense. It wasn't like Qi Shuyan could steal young Master Yang away. Why did my brother's car drive off? Yang Qinshan had searched for a long time but couldn't find him, so she was somewhat down and not in a good mood. Looking at Gao Lingxue standing in the empty space, her discontent soared and she glared at Gao Lingxue angrily. I'm asking you, where's my brother's car? Are you slacking off? As soon as Gao Lingxue heard Yang Qinshan's voice, her face changed at once, and a hint of panic and fear flashed in her eyes as she shivered. She had been so intent on rebuking her cousin just now that she completely forgot about Yang Qinshan. If Yang Qinshan really believed that Gao Lingxue hadn't let her know, this unruly young miss definitely wouldn't let Gao Lingxue off and she would suffer a lot. No, I wouldn't dare. Qinshan, I was going to tell you just now, but your brother threatened me and said not to tell you, Gao Lingxue lied. By the way, I just saw your brother with my cousin, Qi Shuyan. Your brother also helped her pay 500,000 yuan. He paid 500,000 yuan for her. Yang Qinshan frowned. Were they dating? What was her brother's identity? and what was Qi Shuyan's identity? Yeah. Seeing that Yang Chenchen believed her, Gao Lingxue heaved a sigh of relief and thought to herself that that was indeed what it was like to begin with. When Qi Shuyan finished her exam and returned home, she didn't expect to face an inquisition from her grandma, her third aunt, and her third uncle's family. Gao Lingxue stood beside her own father while Qi Shuyan's father, Qi Lingyan, looked at her with a face full of worry and confusion. Qi Shuyan saw this stance and understood everything. Gao Lingxue must have complained to her mother that she casually spent money on an orchid. Gao Lingxue's mother then complained to her grandma, who was determined to teach her a harsh lesson. On the other hand, she was also afraid that Qi Shuyan's father would defend her, so she didn't make things clear to Qi Lingyan. "Sweetie, go upstairs first. I still have something to talk about with grandma and the others." Seeing his mother's taut and scary face, which was full of wrinkles like tree bark, Qi Lingyan knew that his mother was here to pick a fight. "Okay." Qi Shuyan carried the orchid upstairs. Seeing that Qi Shuyan was about to go upstairs, Wu Jufan slammed the cup in her hand on the table with a bang and stood up abruptly as she rebuked furiously, "Do you know what she did out there? You're still protecting her now. A good for nothing like her will cause your death sooner or later. Mom poured out her heart and soul for you, and look, what about you?" Qi Shuyan sneered at Wu Jufan and went upstairs by herself. It would be bad if she ruined this 500,000 orchid in a quarrel later. "You still dare leave? Get down here." Wu Jufan roared furiously at Qi Shuyan with a livid face. Qi Shuyan went up the stairs even faster. Wu Jufan was so angry this time that her cloudy eyes were about to blaze up. Look what you've given birth to. When something happens, she knows to hide behind your back. Lingyan, you must have a conscience. Your third sister raised your daughter for so many years without due, and has worked hard." Qi Hohat wiped the corners of her eyes with her sleeve. "Fourth brother, I punished Yen Yen before because she was too insensible. I was so strict because I really treat her as my daughter. Look at what she's done without me to watch over her. Mom, you've been talking for so long, what the hell happened with Yen Yen?" Qi Lingyan didn't even bother to respond to his sister, who was trying to stir up trouble. He didn't even have to think to know that she was the one who had instigated this. His mother was also someone who valued boys over girls and who believed in rumors. She said she did things for his own good, but not only didn't she think anything of his daughter, she also brought such a big group of people over to criticize her. He was so angry that his chest didn't stop heaving, and he felt cold. "Lingxue, show your fourth uncle his good daughter." Wu Jufan snorted coldly. She wanted to see how he would defend this child who was a burden this time. Gao Lingxue was about to pass the phone over, when a clear voice interrupted her. "No need, I'll do it. I'll explain everything from beginning to end clearly." Qi Shuyan stood halfway down the stairs and looked down at the people in the house. She came down slowly, her gaze as sharp and cold as a blade, shrewd and incisive as it pierced the heart. Such a gaze was very jarring on a young face, scaring Gao Lingxue and Qi Hohat so much that they subconsciously averted their eyes. Wu Jufan was stunned and also intimidated by such a gaze. Chapter 97. Face. Slapping, 1, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 97. Face. Slapping, 1, Wu Jufan frowned. The impression that this granddaughter used to give her was that she was meek and cowardly. When had she ever been so showy? She felt slightly uncomfortable for a moment, feeling like this granddaughter was a different person. But in the end, she had lived for so long. She immediately snapped back to her senses and stared straight at Qi Shuyan with cloudy eyes. Her voice was shrill as she said, "Very good, you've spread your wings. Let me see how you explain this to your dad." Qi Shuyan went downstairs and stood in front of them with her arms crossed. Her eyes were sharp and cold as they swept over Wu Jufan and the others without the slightest bit of warmth. Her black pupils looked like they could suck people in, which was a terrifying feeling. Slightly apprehensive, Chi Hohat avoided Qi Shuyan's gaze. Didn't you say you were going to explain? Why, don't dare to now. Wu Jufan frowned. This granddaughter's eyes were dark, how wretched. Qi Shuyan tucked her hair behind her ear, and when she turned her head to look at Qi Lingyan, her expression was gentle and bright, and nowhere near as aggressive as before. She said soothingly with a smile, Dad, ever since Third Aunt's family emptied us out, I've been thinking about how to earn money. The faces of Qi Hohat and the others twisted at Qi Shuyan's words. Don't I give you enough to eat or a place to stay? Disgusting, how dare you talk to your own aunt like that? You'll get your retribution for this. Midway through Qi Hohat's wails, Qi Shuyan shot a cold glance at her. She was about to howl even harder, but when her mouth was half open, her wails came to a screeching halt. She was horrified to find that she couldn't make a sound, as if a cold hand was locked around her neck, preventing her from speaking. Oh, Third Aunt, you really got your retribution. Qi Shuyan's black eyes were indifferent as her black eyes watched the ghost servant grip Qi Hohat's neck tightly. She said meaningfully, I told you, lying will shorten your tongue. Rubbish. Wu Jufan reprimanded Qi Shuyan discontentedly. She turned around and saw Qi Hohat clutching at her bare neck with both hands. She looked up with her cloudy eyes and she didn't see anything. She asked, Hohat, what's wrong with you? Is something stuck in your throat? Gao Han, Gao Lingxue and the others also stared blankly. They thought that Qi Hohat would kick up a fuss, but after a long time, she still didn't make a sound. Qi Hohat clawed at her neck with her hands. Since she couldn't stop the oxygen from being squeezed out of her throat, one hand grabbed at her bare neck while she hurriedly used the other to open up her throat. Her mouth was wide open and drool dripped from the corner, which looked both comical and ridiculous. Wu Jufan looked for a long time but didn't see anything. Qi Hohat started to act more and more outrageously, and Wu Jufan couldn't help but reprimand her. What are you doing? What's wrong with you? That's right, Hohat, what on earth are you doing in public? Gao Han frowned and looked repulsed by Qi Hohat's disgraceful appearance. Qi Hohat's face was ashen from being choked. The two cold hands around her neck tightened, and she felt like all her oxygen was being squeezed out. Her own mother and husband next to her thought that she was putting on a show. It wasn't until Qi Hohat thought she was going to be inexplicably strangled to death that the cold hands suddenly loosened. She slumped to the floor as if she had been paralyzed, even pulling Gao Han down with her. Qi Hohat gripped his arm tightly as she gulped down large mouthfuls of oxygen. Third Aunt, are you okay? Qi Shuyan walked over and asked. Qi Hohat was about to curse, when she looked up and saw a dark figure appear in Qi Shuyan's dark, horrifying gaze. That figure suddenly smiled malevolently at her. Ah, a ghost. Qi Hohat was so scared that her face turned white. She pushed away Gao Han, who had been pulling at her, and scrambled away. What's wrong with third sister? She came to my house to do a song and dance, holding up a banner every day to say that it's for my own good. It's really been hard on her. Qi Lingyan sneered and looked at Wu Jufan and the others with veiled accusation. Do you think I told her to do it? Wu Jufan's face was ugly. Seeing her fourth son like this, she still didn't know what he meant. Just as she was about to retort, she suddenly remembered that it wasn't like she hadn't done it before. She felt a little guilty, so didn't harp on this point as she cursed Qi Hohat secretly. I wouldn't dare. You're my mother. The sarcasm in Qi Lingyan's eyes grew. You're going to be the death of me. Wu Jufan also knew that she was in the wrong today. She took a deep breath and waved her hand. Ignore her for now. Let's get down to proper business today, no one is going to bluff their way out of this. Let me ask you, what's going on with you buying one flower stalk for 500,000 yuan? Wu Jufan couldn't help but straighten her posture, wanting her granddaughter, Qi Shuyan, to know that even if they cut ties, she was still the head of the family. Qi Shuyan didn't even look at Wu Jufan, her attitude as cold as a stranger's. She walked up to Qi Lingyan and said, "Dad, I bought an orchid for 500,000 yuan today. Where did you get so much money?" Qi Lingyan was stunned. Where did she get so much money? Isn't it because you gave it to her? You spoil her. See, now this has happened. If you lent it to your big brother, this money wouldn't have gone to waste. Wu Jufan couldn't help but get agitated when she heard the amount, and her voice was shrill. "Mom, I don't have that much money. I sent most of my savings back to third sister." Qi Lingyan frowned. "You're still covering for her. Even now, you," Wu Jufan stared incredulously. "It's indeed my own money. Haven't you guys split up my dad's money among yourselves?" Qi Shuyan said coldly, "Young Master Yang was really generous. He told me a few ways to make money, one of which is to grow orchids and treat diseased ones. Buy them for 500,000, sell them for 1 million or even 2 million. When Wu Jufan and Gao Han heard this, they naturally didn't believe this nonsense. Could an orchid be sold for so much money? Then wouldn't gardeners become millionaires? Gao Lingxue sneered. "If you want to lie, think of a better excuse." But Qi Shuyan suddenly took out a card from her pocket, handed it to Qi Lingyan and said seriously, "Dad, there's still 800,000 in here. I earned this for you. You don't have to work so hard for the rest of your life. I'll take care of you and protect you in the future." Qi Shuyan naturally had more than just this bit of money, but in front of a few blood-sucking leeches, she didn't want to bring herself too much trouble. 800,000 was enough to flaunt her wealth, when her uncle's family fought to the death for 50 to 60 a month. Her filial piety toward her father was sincere. Qi Lingyan was both surprised and moved when he heard Qi Shuyan's answer. An iron man almost shed tears. No one had ever said such a thing to him during the bulk of his lifetime. Wu Jufan, Gao Han, and the others stared incredulously at the card in Qi Shuyan's hand. Wu Jufan instantly choked on the curses in her throat, which had nowhere to go. "I don't believe you, you must be lying." Gao Lingxue pulled the card out of Qi Shuyan's grasp and picked up the card reader in the living room. When she saw the number on the screen, she was stupefied. Qi Shuyan was actually that rich. Bnoel Wu Jufan and Gao Han also leaned over, and when they saw the number displayed, they looked at each other in dismay and were momentarily lost for words. Qi Shuyan took advantage of the daze to rudely snatch back her bank card. "You've grown up." Wu Jufan wanted to squeeze out a benevolent smile, but unfortunately, her face was covered in wrinkles, the smile looked like dry orange peel. "If Yan Yan has grown up, you must take care of uncle's family." Qi Shuyan's lip curled in derision and used Wu Jufan's own words against her. "I'm a girl. What use is a worthless loser? I won't support those leeches, I'll only support my dad. I have no obligation to strangers." "Hey, kid, what are you saying? I'm naturally not as good with words as you are. You broke up my dad's family and you have him work like a laborer for your eldest son's family, eating and drinking well and subsidizing other families in passing." Qi Shuyan sneered. "You have nothing better to do but come to my house to make a fuss. Ask yourself honestly, have you ever truly treated my dad as your own son?" Chapter 98. Face.slapping, 2, you are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 98. Face.slapping, 2, what kind of tone is that? Is that the tone that a junior like you should use with an elder? Wu Jufan looked at Qi Shuyan incredulously. After making contact with her sharp and cold gaze, she turned her head to Qi Lingyan and said angrily, listen, I just want the grandchildren to take care of each other. What did I say wrong?" However, when Wu Jufan looked at her son, who used to be the most filial, Qi Lingyan's icy stare, which was exactly the same, stabbed Wu Jufan painfully, and she was stunned. She just wanted everyone to live a good life. Her fourth son was the most capable, so naturally, he had to do more for his brothers. All families followed this principle, so she rebutted angrily, "All of you are the same to me. You are my biological son, how can I not like you? I'm wholeheartedly doing this, you're wholeheartedly doing this for Big Brother and yourself," Qi Lingyan said coldly and forcefully. You unfilial son, how can you hurt your mother's heart so much?" Wu Jufan screamed and pounced at Qi Lingyan, wanting to hit him. She didn't expect Qi Lingyan's next move, which completely stunned her. Qi Lingyan turned his hands over and flipped up his T-shirt to reveal scars all over his body. "Mom, don't stare at me and scold me for being unfilial. Ever since I joined the army, I've always sent my wage home and left only one mouthful for myself. Am I being so frugal just to help raise other people's sons and brothers? I work myself to death to earn my wage and you take it all to subsidize Big Brother's sons. There are all kinds of snacks and toys. Do you know how much my heart hurts when I see Yanyan's frail body that could fail at any moment and when she doesn't even have enough to eat? Mom, do you know how much my heart hurts? And Mom, you always said that Qingyun is delicate and can't do anything, so I put in more effort and fought my way up the ranks. Do you see this? I almost didn't return from this injury." Qi Lingyan pointed at a scar that was a few millimeters away from his heart. "I worked so hard to feed a big family, but in the end, my wife and daughter suffered under your supercilious eyes. Mom, you say that we're all the same, but why do I feel like you're always cutting down one to fill the other? I was the one who pulled strings to find Big Brother a job, but has he ever been grateful to me? Once he ran out of money, he borrowed tens of thousands of yuan from me which he has yet to repay. It's not like the money comes from nowhere. Mom, if you still care about our mother and son relationship, then please don't bother Yanyan anymore. I've had enough of you exploiting me to support my brothers and nephews. Can it be that my daughter still has to repeat her father's path?" Wu Jufan was dumbstruck. When her cloudy eyes saw the scars all over his body, her heart tightened. She averted her eyes and shed tears. It wasn't that she wasn't aware of her son's difficulties in the past, but she subconsciously ignored them or didn't want to know at all. She always thought that her youngest son would be able to help out his other brothers' families. But now, these scars hurt her eyes fiercely. It turned out that what she thought was for his own good in the past was her exploiting her fourth son. Perhaps in the eyes of her fourth son, she and her third daughter were desperately fighting over the things in his house in the name of his own good. She finally opened her mouth halfway, but when she looked at his scars, she actually couldn't even say a word, so she left, even forgetting that her eldest son wanted her to borrow money from her youngest son. When Qi Shuyan came out after her last subject exam, she ran into Yang Hongsheng and Yang Feiyu, who were waiting at the door. "What are you two doing here?" Qi Shuyan was a bit surprised, and her eyes shifted to the somewhat frail and pale Yang Feiyu. He smiled shyly at her. Although he was a bit weak, his spirit and complexion were much better. "Let's go, there are too many people here." "Let's talk in the car," Yang Hongsheng said as he looked at the crowd of people. "In the car." Yang Feiyu apologized with a bitter smile. "Master Qi, I'm really sorry for offending you at the restaurant last time. I misunderstood you." His luck was really extraordinary. He ran into a true master but didn't realize it. He really didn't know whether to call himself lucky or unlucky. "What are you apologizing for? It's not like you did it." Qi Shuyan smiled. It was normal to be questioned in this line of business. Yang Feiyu heaved a sigh of relief when he saw that Qi Shuyan wasn't angry or held a grudge against him. His eyes dimmed. After he woke up, his mother told him about how Qian Hongxin and Lu Xinfang had colluded to deceive and murder him, and how Master Qi had saved him. Yang Feiyu was chagrined that he couldn't see through people. He had caused his parents to worry and he had almost lost his life. He was particularly glad that his cousin, Yang Hongsheng, had found Master Qi. If it wasn't for Master Qi, he really couldn't imagine what would have happened afterward. Qian Hongxin had his father's trust, and his parents mistakenly thought that Lu Xinfang was pregnant with his child. With them acting in tandem, who knew what would have happened to his parents once the two wolves got their hands on his family's assets? Yang Feiyu broke out in a cold sweat at the thought. Moreover, there were very few like Master Qi who were powerful and the real deal. He heard from his cousin that she had even helped drive out a ghost when Yang Hongxing was possessed before. Her talismans were very effective. In the past few days, not to mention his mother constantly reminding him to wear them, he couldn't even bear to take them off himself in the shower. "Brother, is your father still protecting Qian Hongxin?" When Yang Hongxing went to the Yang family today, his third aunt had been complaining about her husband. It seemed that she wanted to send Qian Hongxin to the police on several charges of murder and robbery, but her husband stopped her. Pretending to be pitiful is his specialty. You know, my dad is also a soft-hearted person. Yang Feiyu frowned. He had originally planned to report them to the police station, but Qian Hongxin kept pleading with his dad. He was fed up when he recalled how Qian Hongxin cried and pleaded for leniency on his knees. But my dad also cancelled his recommendation to study abroad and took back the recommendation letter. This can also be considered cutting ties with Qian Hongxin. I don't understand, third uncle, why pity this sort of person? Yang Hongxing shook his head, then suddenly remembered something, and his eyes lit up with confusion. Master Qi, you mentioned a backlash last time. How come I think he still looks fine? Qi Shuyan nodded. The soul separation curse has already rebounded, we just need to wait a little longer. That's good, otherwise, it would be too easy for him. Yang Hongxing pursed his lips. Master Qi, you really don't know how shameless the two of them are. Back then, my brother was drawn to Lu Xinfang's looks. Yang Feiyu, who was sitting in the passenger seat, coughed twice to signal to Yang Hongxing to be tactful. Anyway, my brother saw how pretty Lu Xinfang was and went around yelling that he wouldn't marry anyone but her. My brother is in fact totally a dog for looks, so he really wouldn't marry anyone but her. In the end, Qian Hongxin decided to hide his relationship with Lu Xinfang and even urged my brother to chase after Lu Xinfang. Yang Hongxing sneered. Lu Xinfang acted like a white rabbit that was snatched away. If she had really said that she was dating someone, would my brother really force her? She simply has a pit in her brain, but she's very happy to collect gifts. Okay, don't expose your brother's shortcomings. It's not like I don't know I was wrong. Yang Feiyu indeed hadn't liked Lu Xinfang that much, he cared more about his friend, Qian Hongxin. Unfortunately, Qian Hongxin had been lying to him from beginning to end. Yang Feiyu cut off Yang Hongxing and held out a bank card. Master Qi, this is your reward. He could have transferred the money directly to Qi Shuyan's account, but it was thanks to Master Qi that this matter was resolved, so Yang Feiyu felt that he had to thank her in person to show his sincerity. The Yang family. Yang Hongxing returned home and was shocked by the large number of guests in the living room as soon as he entered. Was his mother holding a banquet? What kind of special festival was this? Son, you're back. Su Jiqing waved. Come and say hi. Mom, what's the happy occasion? There are so many people. Yang Hongxing thought for a moment and was puzzled. Of course there's a happy occasion. Have you forgotten that your cousin just woke up? A lot of our relatives are quite concerned about him and want to know how he's doing. Yang Hongxing was speechless. Now that his cousin had recovered, these relatives should have gone to his cousin's house instead. They wanted to know about his cousin, so why did they come to his house to ask about Yang Feiyu? It wasn't like his cousin had done anything shameful. Hongxing, I heard you're studying business under your dad. You're really talented. Hongxing, your complexion looks good. Did you take something for it? By the way, I remember you're from B County's famous university. My younger daughter is going to take the exam. Do you think Auntie should ask for a peace talisman? Maybe she can get the top score. Hongsheng is really becoming more spirited each time I see him. I thought he was promising when he was a child. He also knows a lot of people, so his experiences are quite different from ours. When these relatives saw that young Hongsheng had come, they surrounded him and praised practically every part of him that could and couldn't be seen until he got goosebumps. Did his relatives take the wrong medicine? Why were they praising him so much today? In the past, he was always the negative example that every parent used as they said that he was a good for nothing who always hung out with scoundrels. Now, he was being praised like he was a god reincarnated. He had only gotten into the university he went to because his father stuffed him through the back door, which made him a little embarrassed. After praising him non-stop, they finally made clear their intentions as they shifted to the real topic at hand. It was only then that young Hongsheng realized that this was all for the peace talismans. When he thought about it, his third aunt would have told her sisters about his cousin waking up from a coma. When the news spread, they realized that this person was a genuine master. Since the master was so powerful, the peace talismans would naturally be real, so they had scrambled over for the talismans. Chapter 99. Young Hongsheng lifts his head high. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 99. Young Hongsheng lifts his head high. Young Hongsheng looked at these aunts and uncles in front of him. In the past, these relatives always said that he was hedonistic and squandered money. The news in particular of him buying so many talismans a while ago and being beaten up by his father for it spread widely among his relatives. They privately laughed at him for being feudalistic and superstitious, and frequently advised him to consume less fantasy novels and dramas. He never thought that this bunch would now come to him for a favor. Sure enough, the wheel of fortune had turned. He suddenly felt proud and elated. It was just that when it came to the peace talismans, young Hongsheng's heart throbbed painfully. Those talismans that he had hoarded were all ruined by his father, and the remaining 2 talismans had been given to his cousin's family. Not to mention these relatives, he himself had recently been pressing Master Qi for talismans. Unfortunately, Master Qi said that she was busy with the college entrance exam and she didn't have time to draw talismans, so she told him to go to the Taobao shop to buy them. Young Hongsheng had scowled miserably. If he could have snapped them up from the shop, he would already have done so long ago. Master Qi has been very busy recently and doesn't have much time to draw talismans, so everyone should wait a little longer. Young Hongsheng brushed off this group of relatives and ran away. He loved listening to these relatives' praises, but he would also be embarrassed if he heard any more. When he went upstairs, his mother, Su Jiqing, hurriedly pulled him to the side. "Son, I feel that this matter with your cousin is impossible to guard against. You better hurry and buy a few talismans from the master." Young Hongsheng was astonished. Why was his mother acting like those relatives? Su Jiqing coughed twice and recounted what Su Yunqin told her. It turned out that the Yang family had tossed Lu Xinfang out. Somehow, Lu Xinfang's family found out and showed up at the door to make Yang Feiyu take responsibility. Su Yunqin scolded those people fiercely. A relative was so angry that he took out a pocket knife to stab her, but Yang Feiyu rushed over and quickly blocked the knife for his mother. Su Yunqin had almost died of fright, but when she examined her son, she found no wounds on him. Instead, the person who had tried to stab Yang Feiyu was bounced off. Su Jiqing's eyes burned as she looked at young Hongsheng and she couldn't help but say, "Hongsheng, you must build a good relationship with Master Qi and ask for a few more talismans. After all, it's better to be safe than sorry. If someone targets and plots against you like what happened to your cousin, you can find out before things get to that point." Young Hongsheng looked gloomily at his mother. "Mom, Master Qi hasn't had time to draw talismans recently, and it's not like I have the money." Su Jiqing patted her son's shoulder generously. "I'll give you another 1,000,000 yuan in pocket money, but can you really not get the peace talismans?" Su Jiqing looked regretful. She frowned as she thought of the talismans that her husband had burned. Her heart ached and she couldn't help but grumble, seriously, your dad. He doesn't know how to do good things. Why did he burn your talismans? Yang Hongsheng's mouth twitched. Mom, you also had a hand in that, why was it all pushed onto his dad? Hey, Chen Chen has grown into a beautiful girl. Aren't you currently taking the college entrance exam? Work hard to get into a prestigious university like your cousin. Come and sit down. Su Jiqing was talking to Yang Hongsheng, when she suddenly heard a relative's voice. She turned around and saw Yang Qinchen's mother, Wu Yuting, and Yang Qinchen. As soon as Yang Qinchen entered Yang Hongsheng's house, she saw a huge group of relatives in the living room and jumped in fright. She wondered what day it was, for so many people to be here at the Yang family. Hey, what's the happy occasion? Everyone's here. Wu Yuting was also confused. No, they're just visiting. Su Jiqing came out to greet them, neither warm nor indifferent, but at least her attitude was much better than before. Wu Yuting sighed inwardly when she saw Su Jiqing's attitude. Before, their family had been very close with the main branch of the Yang family. Her husband wasn't the best at business, but it had always been her husband and brother-in-law who handled business matters. Only Su Jiqing's husband got a free ride. Outsiders would also give them some face out of consideration for the Yang family, but now that her family was a little distant from the Yang family's main branch, people frequently avoided them. At that thought, she couldn't help but grumble at Yang Qinchen. If this frivolous girl hadn't offended that big shot, the Yang family wouldn't have alienated their family like this. Hello, big aunt. Yang Qinchen had taken the bullet too many times when she came here, so her attitude was cautious. There was no sign of her usual arrogance and bossiness, she was really scared of her big aunt's cold face, and obediently greeted her. Su Jiqing smiled and nodded politely without speaking. Yang Qinchen was a bit lost. In the past, Big Aunt still doted on her dearly, but now, she couldn't even be bothered to talk to her. Go find your cousin. I'm going to talk with your aunt. Wu Yuting motioned at her. Yang Qinchen nodded. After taking a few steps, she turned around and looked at the two of them. Gao Lingxue said that Yang Hongsheng spent 500,000 yuan on her cousin, and it was probably true. She was very unhappy when she thought that Qi Shuyan might become her sister. In law. Of course, she didn't dare say anything to her brother, Yang Hongsheng. Her brother didn't even pay attention to her now. What if she said something like that again and her brother took his anger out on her? So, she wanted her mother to be the one to pass on the news, it was always more useful coming from the elders. Su Jiqing was a bit surprised. What did Wu Yuting have to say to her? Could it be a business matter again? Wu Yuting pulled Su Jiqing aside and exchanged pleasantries on other topics, then brought up the matter of Yang Hongsheng spending money on Qi Shuyan. I heard about what happened to Fei Yu's family recently. The more I think about it, the more I think that this girl is a bit like the daughter-in-law Fei Yu's family brought in. I'm just afraid that Hongsheng is too honest and has been tricked. Hearing Wu Yuting's words, Su Jiqing was puzzled. Spent 500,000. Girl. She noticed that her son had been quite obedient lately and hadn't been running around blindly. I think she's from Qinchen's school, a girl named Qi Shuyan. Girls nowadays are different from what we were like before. They just accept all the gifts they get. TSK, how impolite. As soon as Su Jiqing heard the name, her brows eased. 500,000 doesn't seem like much. Prices were so low back then, how can they compare with now? Su Jiqing's thoughts were happy. She had no idea that her son was pretty good at coaxing people. She didn't know if Master Qi liked Hongsheng's gift, but it seemed she would have to pick some better gifts later to befriend her. Wu Yuting was done talking with Su Jiqing, and on the way back, Yang Qinchen hurriedly asked happily, Mom, did you tell Big Aunt? Wu Yuting was depressed. She thought that Su Jiqing would be angry at the news, but instead, she seemed a little happy. Wu Yuting had a bad feeling when she saw how Su Jiqing looked like she felt the gifts were too little and wanted to make up for it. I think your big aunt seems to like that girl, Wu Yuting mumbled strangely, before she suddenly glared vigilantly at Yang Qianqian. Since your big aunt likes that girl and your cousin likes her too, don't make a fuss anymore. When the time comes, you might not even be able to enter the Yang family door, and might be kicked out. Yang Qianqian was stupefied for a moment. She even ignored her mother's scolding and only felt like she had been hit by a bolt from the blue. Big Aunt liked Qi Shuyan, and Yang Qianqian remembered how her cousin had been at Qi Shuyan's beck and call these past few days. Yang Qianqian wanted to cry without tears. Had she known that Qi Shuyan might become her sister-in-law in the future, she absolutely wouldn't have dared bully her. Chapter 100. Qian Hongxin's Miserable Situation. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 100. Qian Hongxin's Miserable Situation. After the exam, Qi Shuyan returned to school to sort out her books and ran into Yang Qianqian several times. She felt that the way Yang Qianqian looked at her was strange. Qi Shuyan raised her eyebrows, thinking that Yang Qianqian was up to something again, but she didn't pay it much mind. As soon as Qi Shuyan entered the classroom, she heard Li Xiaoting's voice crackling like she had eaten gunpowder as she argued with a classmate. You say it's none of your business. As if. If you hadn't talked nonsense in front of Shujun, would she have run away crying after the exam? It's just a few pimples on her face, how can you be so superficial? Yi Hongwei, you've gone too far with your words. What do you mean it's just a few pimples? Nobody else has pimples that look that scary, densely packed like a beehive. The problem is that she's always hovering in front of me. I have trypophobia, so I feel a bit uncomfortable looking at her. Yi Hongwei was unconvinced. And I didn't say anything outrageous, I kindly advised her to go to the hospital for a look, and she ran away crying. What did I say wrong? You can choose not to look, but you can't say something so hurtful. You must apologize to Shujun. Li Xiaoting glared at Yi Hongwei as her voice went up in volume by 8 degrees. Yi Hongwei rolled his eyes, unable to stand being pestered by Li Xiaoting. He didn't want things to get too ugly, so he nodded. Okay, so troublesome. I'll apologize when she comes later, okay? After the quarrel, the discussion in the classroom didn't stop. Actually, Li Xiaoting, Hongwei means well. I think Xing Shujun looks like she has some kind of skin disease on her face. It's better for her to have it looked at sooner, a classmate said. Yeah, it's frightening to look at. Before, it was only a few scattered around, but now her face is practically full. It looks like there's even pus inside. I don't even dare to look anymore, another student said. You should be careful with your words, Li Xiaoting couldn't help but say when she heard these slanderous words. You might be worried, but aren't you the same? You've been ignoring Zheng Shujun these past few days. Yeah, can you not be so hypocritical? None of us said anything. It was like eating explosives. How am I a hypocrite? Li Xiaoting shouted loudly. Seeing that Li Xiaoting was about to argue with the crowd again, Qi Shuyan hurriedly walked in and interjected with a smile, everyone's here so early. After Qi Shuyan's interruption, the tension in the classroom finally eased and the others greeted her. The questions were so difficult this time. I wonder who came up with the exam. Qi Shuyan said casually, and the rest of the students immediately felt the same, their faces looking thin. They took turns scolding the twisted examiner who came up with the paper, one after another. Seeing that the change of topic was a success, Qi Shuyan hurriedly pulled Li Xiaoting, who looked like she had lost a cockfight, into the corridor. Shuyan, why did you stop me? Those people have no compassion at all, especially Yi Hongwei. Doesn't he know that Shujun likes him? What nonsense is he talking about? He deserves a scolding. Li Xiaoting was displeased. Xiaoting, I know you have good intentions, but don't do anything bad for it. Shujun has thin skin, so you'll only make her more embarrassed. Qi Shuyan sighed and said, arguing won't solve the problem. Qi Shuyan thought of her previous life, when she was just like Jing Shujun, with her face covered in acne and her skin turning a coarse yellow. She had wished that everyone would forget her and wanted to hide away inside a shell forever. No one else could empathize more with Jing Shujun. What should we do? Li Xiaoting calmed down and also felt that Qi Shuyan's words made sense. Jing Shujun was delicate and sensitive, so she probably wouldn't be able to stand it if things got out of hand. Let's wait for Shujun to come to school first. Qi Shuyan frowned, finding it a bit tricky. It had to be known that this borrowed luck was just a loan in the eyes of ordinary people, but for warlocks, it involved justice, human luck, and fate. Moreover, in her previous life, her luck had been borrowed for 5 whole years. Just when she was about to get revenge, that warlock was killed. The luck-borrowing spell fell apart. According to the rumors, the warlock offended that big shot and was directly chopped into minced meat on the spot and fed to the dogs. The two waited in school for a long time, but Jing Shujun didn't show up, so they could only leave first and chatted idly as they walked down the street. Shuyan, I see you're carrying so many books. Want me to carry some of them for you? Li Xiaoting had long brought back her own books after the exams. No need. Qi Shuyan shook her head. There was a storage talisman in her bag, so there was no weight on her shoulders at all. All right. If you can't carry them, remember to tell me. Li Xiaoting glanced at Qi Shuyan's schoolbag. But seriously, this schoolbag is quite big, it doesn't even look like it's full. If I hadn't seen you pack it with so many books, I would have thought it wasn't heavy. Qi Shuyan smiled. It wasn't that the bag had a large capacity, but she didn't say anything else. Turning her head and looking around, she didn't expect to see Qian Hongxin, who looked like he was in a hurry. Shuyan, what are you looking at? Li Xiaoting followed Qi Shuyan's gaze and saw a store for branded second-hand goods. She was a little surprised. You want to buy a bag? Qi Shuyan shook her head. Not interested. I saw a familiar person. Xiaoting, you go back first, I'll go take a look. Oh, okay then. Li Xiaoting thought Qi Shuyan was going to catch up with the person, so she nodded and left. Qi Shuyan walked to the bag shop which Qian Hongxin had entered on the opposite side of the street. Standing at the door, she could hear the voices inside. Boss, you're such a scammer. This bag is still new and is from a famous brand. How can it only be worth 2,500 yuan? It's at least 5,000 or 6,000 yuan. Qian Hongxin looked at the boss in disbelief. He thought that he could sell it for at least half the price. Who knows if this is real or not? There's no tag, no receipt. Imitations nowadays are becoming more and more deceptive. How am I supposed to know if it's authentic or not? The price I gave you is already pretty good, the boss said impatiently. Qian Hongxin argued with the boss, but to no effect. The boss insisted on 2,500 yuan and refused to budge. Qian Hongxin was so angry that his face turned extremely ugly and the color of a pig's liver. He started to complain about Lin Xinfang in his heart, that she didn't know how to keep the invoice when she accepted Yang Feiyu's gift. Qian Hongxin gritted his teeth and finally agreed to the boss's price. He had really reached the end of the road recently. He had originally been living in the Yang house, but since the matter of him and Lu Xinfang colluding to harm Yang Feiyu was exposed, he and Lu Xinfang were swept out the door and had to cram inside the simple and rough dormitory assigned by the company he was interning with. He knelt and begged Yang Wenbin with snot and tears all over his face to give him a chance to change, and Yang Wenbin, that rotten old man, agreed, but Yang Wenbin cancelled his recommendation letter and never mentioned sending him to study abroad again. Because of this matter, Qian Hongxin utterly hated Yang Wenbin and Su Yunqin. He felt that one was hypocritical and the other was unforgiving and simply bullied others with her power. Just as he had been planning to work hard in the company to achieve results that they wouldn't dare underestimate, a phone call from Su Yunshin caused all his efforts to go down the drain. It turned out that Su Yunshin was acquainted with the company's president, who fired him right away. Qian Hongxin initially wanted to go and explain things to his boss, but who knew which blabbermouth started it as his and Lu Xinfang's matter spread all over the company. He couldn't stay in the company anymore, so he took Lu Xinfang outside to rent an apartment while he looked for a job. The prices in Fuzhou were expensive, especially housing. He was a fresh graduate now and couldn't afford it at all. Fortunately, he was quick-witted and smart enough to notice the jewelry bag which Yang Feiyu had given to Lu Xinfang before. Thinking this, he felt a little smug. Qi Shuyan looked at Qian Hongxin from where she was standing not far away. Seeing his self-satisfied look, she shook her head with a hint of sarcasm in her eyes. Was this the true love that Lu Xinfang talked about? She really didn't know what Lu Xinfang saw in him. He had even taken out his girlfriend's bag to sell. Yang Feiyu was a good for nothing, but he was clearly still a lot better than Qian Hongxin, who piled all the blame on Lu Xinfang when things went wrong. But it could be that beauty was in the eye of the beholder, and she just liked Qian Hongxin for some unfathomable reason. From Qian Hongxin's physiognomy, Qi Shuyan could see that the backlash from the soul separation curse had already begun. Plus, she had added a small gift of a bad luck curse. In the future, his words would get stuck in his mouth any time he drank cold water. She wondered if he would still be able to smile in the future.